All right. Hi. Welcome to We Are the Change, our regular series of conversations about how you can interact with the Colorado State Legislature. I'm Jeriel. I'm the political director with Western Colorado Alliance. And this week's guest is Tom Acker, who's a Spanish professor at Colorado Mesa University and the board president of the Hispanic Affairs Project. Tom has done some pretty extensive outreach with ag workers over the last 15 years, specifically with range workers, and he's collaborated as a volunteer with Colorado Legal Services in compiling the report Overworked and Underpaid, which was a survey conducted back in 2009 on the working conditions of range workers, specifically in the sheep industry. Tom, you have such extensive knowledge on this subject, and today we're going to be talking about Senate Bill 2187, which is still working its way through the legislature this year, and it's the Farmworkers Bill of Rights. So really glad to have you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this really important bill. And I have just a few questions really. And the first one is, what is this bill and why is it important?
This bill is a real paradigm shift in Colorado and arguably in the United States. Other states have legislated similar bills, Washington State, New York, and I'm trying to remember the other one, but those two states, California. In what we're trying to do is get rid of the old, basically Jim Crow laws that were passed during the New Deal era, which exempted agricultural workers. And in those days, agricultural workers were almost exclusively Black. And so to get legislation passed by the southern states, it was agreed that although the overtime, access to overtime, minimum wage, right to organize, et cetera, all the benefits that are enjoyed by other sectors of the economy and other groups of laborers are not accessible to agricultural workers. So this bill is long overdue legislation to guarantee protections that other workers have enjoyed for generations, literally.
Wow. It's so amazing how eye-opening just a few moments of history can be to really drive home the fact how rooted in racism each of our systems are and how necessary the bills that we're working on today are really important to addressing those systemic issues. Powerful. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about what specifically is in this bill that will be changes for our ag working community?
Yeah, so I already mentioned the previous, laws in the state of Colorado did not allow workers access to overtime pay, for example. This is one of the pieces of legislation that has created a lot of pushback from industry, and they're arguing that it's going to be too costly to allow overtime. But as one of the lawyers working with us, David Seligman, has made clear, the reason overtime exists is to prevent or to encourage adequate staffing of any industry. If you have overtime, it becomes costly for the employer to pay time and a half, let's say. So what this bill is trying to do is just say, well, don't abuse your workers. Don't make them have to work, 65 hours in a week. Just have adequate staffing, get enough workers so that they can enjoy a normal 40-hour work week, is one of the elements that we're talking about. And that makes good sense. And, it's understandable that one of the big things that an employer is going to try to do is keep their overhead down. But at this point in our history, we need to understand that agricultural workers are some of the hardest working workers in our economy. They're absolutely essential workers. Without them, we would literally not have food on our tables. They have too long been viewed as expendable in the sense that they don't have to earn a living wage, et cetera. And, frankly, at this point, I hear employers saying, well, we can't find good workers. We can't find good workers. And we're going, well, you know what? Maybe if you treated them well, you would be able to find good workers. Okay, so that's one of the items that we're talking about here, overtime. The other one is the right to organize, the right to meet and tell the employer that you have grievances without fear of retaliation. And if there is retaliation, then you have a right to sue either you or the Department of Labor could sue for you. And there's protections against retaliations. There's also a right to breaks in these super hot, drought conditions that we're living under now in the state of Colorado in the summer, where we were over 100 degrees for a month. Those workers are working in conditions, and they need to be guaranteed breaks, adequate water, an opportunity to sit in a shaded area. And in the pandemic setting, we need to guarantee that they have living accommodations that are provided by the employers that allow them X amount of foot space in order to not be tripping over one another, that there's circulating air in the buildings they're living in, and in the rest areas that they're not touching one another and they're able to spread out and rest. They have meal breaks. That should be, that's another item that is guaranteed in this legislation.
So we're talking about basic human rights here
that
are essentially afforded to most of us viewing these videos, but should be afforded to anyone living and working and being asked to live and work in this industry.
Correct.
Sorry.
And just one other thing to mention, a large portion of the people coming in are not English speakers. People working in this industry are not English speakers. And so that creates another layer of vulnerability. And so one of the things that this legislation would also guarantee is access to service providers, consular representatives, medical representatives on employer property, and that the employer cannot prevent the workers having access to those representatives that are here to inform them and provide them the services that all of us have access to.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, I do think it's important to mention that we as Western Colorado Alliance certainly work with a local ag community, and these our ag community are ranchers who run small ranches and have seen some of their own wins this year in terms of the Animal Shares Act, allowing them to sell, their own cuts of meat, and just trying to gain access for just connecting local ranchers direct to consumers. And we have a lot of support for this bill within our ranching community. And it seems that the bigger the ag industry gets, the more pushback we have. And I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to address specifically to any of the pushback we've seen in this bill or seen to this bill that you just want to take a moment to really highlight or address.
Well, one of the things that I can mention, and this goes back a couple of years, is the state of Colorado authorized wage increases. The state of California authorized wage increases, legislated wage increases for sheep herders. And when we were pushing for that here in Colorado, which occurred through the Department of Labor, they ended up getting, almost a 100% increase in their wages. And there was, obviously outcry from the part of the ranching community. But one of the arguments that we used was there has not been a decrease in the number of sheep in California as a result of that legislation. The amount of sheep that they are raising there's not been a market decrease. In other words, people are not leaving the industry. And so we're saying, well, looking at New York and Washington and California in this light, in this legislation, and the fact that they have passed similar legislation, they're modeling for us the best way to make this legislation be successful. There's certainly no interest in the part of Project Protect, which is an organization made up of small agricultural producers. There is no interest in their harming this industry because they are participants in this industry. So those are two important things to recognize.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about where this bill is at in the process? Because we've discussed this bill before. You joined us on a We Are the Change webinar, and I want to thank you for that, because we couldn't even give you the time that this bill deserved then. But it's taken a while when we've seen some of our other tier 1 kind of big topic bills pass. So what's going on with this bill, and where is it at in the process?
Well, it's due tomorrow to get a hearing in the the Senate Appropriations Committee, Friday, May 7th at 8 a.m. And that's where it is. There's also lots of interviews going on right now with the House. Different committee members are inviting workers to testify in meetings, and also proponents to testify. That's really one of the voices that legislators really want to hear, is workers at this point, and how this bill would impact them. I'm going to be offering a link to you all, and I've already shared it with you, Jeriel, to access a toolkit that Project Protect is inviting supporters to use, which includes a lot of good information about the bill, organizing tools, ways you can reach out to your legislators. I just reached out to Matt Soper, I think he's District 55, 54, I forget. Janice Rich is one, and Matt's the other. And I wrote to both of them, and just suggesting to them that this bill is not meant to harm agricultural industry in our region. It's meant to enhance the welfare of the workers. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can have both, and we want them to be aware of that.
That's really good to know. And so I guess my next question for you would be, so it sounds like it's about to go through its last committee in the Senate, and then it's going to head over to the House. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how I understand it. And I have to confess, I have not been actively participating in a lot of these conversations. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is what I've understood from the meeting we had yesterday. And one of the things that I wanted to just point out is there's a couple of things afoot that supporters and Towards Justice, one of the organizations that's supporting this legislation, is doing. They are suggesting that we should be writing cards and notes to legislators. We're also, if there is a town hall where one of our state legislators is presenting, to please go and ask them if they will support this bill. Be willing to stand up and directly ask them that. In the next 2 weeks, there's a proposal that, and stay tuned for this, that there's going to be a lobbying day for SB 87. And one of the lobbyists that we're working with will direct anybody interested in talking to legislators to those legislators' offices. We don't know the dates yet for that, but please stay tuned. We will certainly share those with you. Again, those are some of the things that are in the works right now.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, and just in my own following of this bill, I definitely want to note that there's been some amendments to this bill. As it was introduced, it certainly changed, and that's come as a result of conversations with the ag community. in terms of trying to make sure that this bill is first prioritizing the health and welfare of farm workers, but also understanding that we want to be sensitive to protecting our local food community as a vital system within Colorado. So, I think we might continue to see some changes, but as long as the human rights efforts of this bill stay intact, which I think is hopefully going to happen, this is a really fantastic bill that could mean something really huge for how many ag workers do we have? How many laborers do we have in the state of Colorado? Do you know?
As I understand, and don't quote me on this, but obviously you will. I'm thinking somewhere in the order of 63,000, but
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that. And forgive me for not knowing that. I could tell you approximately how many sheep herders there are. There's about 200 of them, so that's a minor subset.
Obviously a huge number, and when we do decide to distribute this in email communications, I'll look into that a little bit more so I can send out a specific number. But yeah, so for anyone who's been following along with maybe what Western Colorado Alliance has been up to, obviously we haven't had a chance to do many actions in person because of COVID, but we were able to come together and do a banner drop that was a statewide effort with our friends at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. And here on the West Slope, we worked really closely with the Hispanic Affairs Project to do this banner drop, specifically with the messaging that immigrants are essential and they literally put our food on our tables. And to what expense are they doing that at this moment? When we sit down to eat in the comfort of our homes, what did it take to get that food to us in that moment? And so this bill, I think, is so important in understanding and really reconciling what we've asked of laborers to get us to the point of being able to have food on our tables. Something else I don't know if you'd like to touch on that I do plan to include when we do distribute this out via email and in other communication channels is this Colorado Agricultural Workers Brief. And it sounds like the issue, the purpose of the brief that we'll be distributing was to highlight the agricultural workers in Colorado who are exempted or excluded from Colorado state statutes and regulations. Is there anything you'd like to say about that particular briefing before we include it?
Yeah, there's different entities that are, giving their opinions on this legislation and what they propose it will do. In the past, there's been with the exception of the survey I alluded to earlier about overworked and underpaid, about workers and their conditions, there's been a tendency to look on the agricultural sector just through the eyes of the employers as an industry, but not taking into consideration the workers' conditions. And that has created a situation where there's a lack of data on working conditions. And so one of the things that this law or this bill, it's not a law yet, this bill would do is create a commission which would research and create a database for the conditions that workers are living under and working under. And that's really important. And so in regards to this document that was put out by the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, this was largely the product of Nicole DeVita and Jennifer Rodriguez, who worked to present that side of, and this is previous to the bill. This is really not supporting the bill per se. It doesn't mention the bill. What it is doing, it's agricultural workers, Colorado's agricultural workers. It's talking about their situation and in academic terms, in the sense that it's not, an emotional plea. It's just saying this is the reality of agricultural workers, and we haven't had this information disseminated largely as it should have been. And so I think you're going to be sharing this with members, correct?
Yes.
And I think it's important that everybody read this and understand, where we are right now before this legislation goes into effect, if we hope it will.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share about the bill in general or this conversation before we end today?
I think it's essential that community members step up and weigh in on this, become informed. We're trying to get, as we just mentioned, Project Protect has this wonderful toolkit that everybody can use. It'll give you an opportunity to get more informed about the legislation and then steps to take, things that you can do. We really think that community members and legislators have said this before, that they listen to you. If you are a member of their constituents, they will listen to you. And so I think one of the things at this point in the bill's life is to have community support and have it be voiced clearly that we are in support of this legislation.
Absolutely. Oftentimes Western Colorado Alliance likes to work or attempts to work directly with impacted communities to really elevate their voices in advocating for change. And in this particular instance, I think it's important that as consumers, as to the fact that food is life, that we all elevate our collective voices, even if it's small, even if it's short, and concise, to talk about the importance of this. Because again, we are benefiting at the expense of another human and a demographic that is highly disadvantaged and often afraid to speak up on their own behalf at the risk of real potential danger. So, I don't often share my own personal stories, but I'll just end us, I hope, if you don't mind, Tom, by just sharing what really brings me to this issue. It's very near and dear to me, even though I enjoy all of the work of Western Colorado Alliance and believe that our work intersects so often in terms of really creating a more healthy, just, and self-reliant future for Western Colorado. But my privilege of being here in this country and being able to work today is because of the strength of my grandparents and my parents. So my father immigrated from Mexico, as did my mother's grandmother. And so because of the strength of my own family, I have the privilege of being on this end and being able to speak and have a voice. And I have family, lots of family, who still works and lives and picks fields in California, and lots of family in Mexico who I haven't had the chance to meet yet. But I understand that the color of my skin presenting very white, and the fact that I did not have to be that brave person to make the life change to come up into the US has benefited myself, my daughter, my future family, in a way that I can't think of anything more important than spending time here fighting for workers' rights. So thank you. This topic is so important, and I urge all of our members to take an action. We'll have lots of links for you as you're seeing this, and some time still to be able to really raise your voice on this issue. And I just want to encourage everyone to like and follow us, not only on YouTube, but also on Facebook and Twitter, if you're on Twitter, so that you can get up-to-date information on what's going on with these campaigns and other work that Western Colorado Alliance is doing. And Tom, thank you so much for being here today and having this important conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I look forward to all the support from our members. I am also a WCA member, so yeah.
Yes, I didn't mention that, but you are, Tom, and you do represent us so well. So thank you. All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.